Hi, good morning. I'm Rosane Oliveira. I'm Director of Integrative Medicine at UC Davis School of Medicine. I think that's enough of presentation. So our program started 5 years ago. We have an awesome blog where we teach people how to eat better, but I'm going to be talking about it during my presentation. So today, I did my best to not give a technical lecture. So if there's any word that I say that you don't understand, just raise your hand. I know I'm not supposed to answer questions, but at least if I say something that you don't know what it is, just pause me. I'll do my best not to do that. I'm going to be talking about your diet, your genes, and you, because it's very common. And I can ask you, how many of you have at least once thought or heard someone say, I'm overweight because everybody in my family is overweight. It's in my genes. There's nothing I can do about. Okay, I can tell you from experience that every person, especially every women in my family, are overweight. And I'm not. But I'm the one who eats different than everybody else. And the talk today is to talk about that. So how to take control of your obesity genes. So when we think about overweight, as I just said, the first thing we think is, I just need to exercise more. So usually when people go on a scale and they say, oh my gosh, I have to go back and do my exercise. Or they think it's all the fault of their genes, or worse, they think it's slow metabolism. And we hear that a lot, especially from women when they hit menopause. Oh, my metabolism now is slower, and that's the reason why I'm gaining weight or I cannot lose weight as fast. And I'm here to tell you that all of this matters. Of course, exercise matters, your genes matter, but the right food is the most important thing. If you eat the right food, the genes won't matter, the physical exercise won't matter. And I always tell people that you lose weight in the kitchen, you get fit in the gym. So I'm not here to tell anyone not to exercise, because exercise is important, but exercise is to get you strength and to get you fit, not to make you lose weight. When we think about weight, there's two centers in our brain that regulate how much we eat and the weight we have. And so when we talk about weight, it starts in the brain. It's in the satiety centers and the appetite control center. So the center that says, yes, you had enough to eat, or the center that says, yes, it's time to eat again, your appetite control. And all of this energy balance, how much food you eat, starts in a little part of the brain called hypothalamus. I'm not going to go into detail because it's going to be very technical, but there's this hormone called leptin. Most people don't talk about them when you talk about overweight. All of you know about insulin, but many of you, if not most of you, never heard about leptin. But leptin is the key hormone when you talk about obesity. And it goes like this. We eat, then fat gets stored, then fat cells secrete leptin, then the brain sees leptin, and the brain increases leptin, then signals the brain to say it's time to stop eating. And that's how it goes. So anytime leptin goes down, you start eating again. And so that's how it works, all right? So anytime you have super low leptin, the brain or the body says you're in starvation mode, so you have to eat. So there's two conditions, there's two things that make the brain think that you're starving. The first one is called leptin deficiency. So it's a rare genetic disease. So these people don't produce leptin. So the brain is always thinking that they are starving, so they cannot stop eating. There have been 14 cases reported, all in the UK, and most of these people are related. So in the same family. But what most people will have is a condition called leptin resistance. I know you're familiar with insulin resistance, but not leptin resistance. So it means that your body is producing tons of leptin, but your brain doesn't see it. You have a lot of leptin, but the brain doesn't see. So for the brain, it's as if you don't have leptin at all, and you continue to eat. There's two things that make the brain stop seeing leptin. Inflammation, whenever inflammation is high, and high insulin. All right, so when we talk about high insulin, most people would think or believe that it has everything to do with carbs. That's why you shouldn't eat carbs, because carbs are going to increase your glucose. Increasing your glucose is going to increase your insulin, because insulin is the hormone that is going to remove the excess glucose from the blood and bring into your cells. And so if it's high insulin is causing then, or high insulin is going to cause the brain not to see leptin. So the key is carbs. And I'm here to tell you that not the main drivers of leptin resistance is a high-fat diet, because a fat-rich diet will have the two things that cause leptin resistance. It's going to increase inflammation markers, and it's going to cause insulin resistance, even more so than high carbs. Especially when we're talking about carbohydrates, they are whole grains, and I'm not talking about pure sugar or refined grains. But when you talk about carbohydrates, we won't see hyperinsulinemia or high insulin, but when we have a high-fat diet, we do. So high-fat diet induces the hypothalamus, this region in the brain that regulates energy balance. So apoptosis is when the cell dies. Now it's cell death. So high-fat diet kills the cells in the hypothalamus that regulates how much food we eat. And obesity, here's just another study showing that is associated with injury or scars in the hypothalamus, and this has been shown both in mice and in humans, meaning high-fat diet injures hypothalamus, increases inflammation, increases insulin, and makes the brain not to see insulin. Okay, so this is as technical as I'm gonna get. So everything now is gonna be easier to understand. So when we talk about food, like the previous speaker mentioned, food is the most intimate relationship we have with the outside world. And what it means is food is chemistry, right? Food is biochemistry. Everything that we put in our mouth is going to change the biochemistry inside of us. So when we talk about food, food is not let's make a deal. So you can never outburn a bad diet. You see a lot of people saying, I just ran 10 kilometers, so now I can sit down and I can eat all the pancakes and bacon I can, or I can eat anything I want because I just burned, I don't know, 600 calories. It's not like that, okay? So there are many genes that are associated with obesity, and there are genes that are associated with the food we eat and how these genes are going to be expressed. So I'm going to be talking about just one. It's called ApoA5, this one here. And what this gene basically says is anytime a person eats more than 30% of the calories from fat, they are going to be overweight, and they're going to be increases the risk of them being overweight and obese anytime they eat more than 30% of their diet from fat, okay? So whenever we talk about food and obesity or genes and obesity, the way we try to establish if one or the other is related to the outcome, which is obesity, we tend to do studies with twins. Why? Because twins will have identical genes, correct? So if you study two people, they have identical genes, you give them different diets, and you see that one is overweight and the other is not, then you see diet has a big effect, correct? But if you have these two twins with identical genes and you give them different diet and they're both overweight, then you say it's the genes because they have this. Got it? Okay, so when they did this study back in the 90s, they assumed that, okay, when it comes to obesity, 70% is genetics and only 30% is environment. And environment is everything. It can be smoking, exercise, diet. And I say, is that really true? And the reason why they said that is because they did a study with both identical and fraternal twins. So identical, they have the same genes. Fraternal, they are just two brothers or two sisters or brother, sister. They were born together, but they don't actually have identical genes. And when they were reared together, when they were reared apart, you know, those stories of twins are raised by different families. When they got these twins together, they had very similar bodies. And they say, if they're in different places, so they're not eating the same food, and they're still overweight, it means there's a big genetic component, correct? But one thing that they didn't take into consideration is that most people tend to eat very similarly in terms of fat content. So it doesn't matter if I was raised in California and my identical twin sister was raised in Germany. If you're both eating more than 30% of a diet from fat, we're going to see results like that. And I think that's the problem when we just focus on one element, the genes, without taking into consideration the details about the diet, okay? So I was born an identical twin. This is me and my sister when we were 6 months old. And I was lucky enough that my master and my PhD all has been done in genetics. And it never occurred to me to look at myself until I started really working on nutrition. Before I was working in infectious disease. But then when I started working on this new field called nutritional genomics, which is like how the food you eat controls your genes, is then I noticed that yes, we are identical, but something happened in the past 20 years that made a huge difference in our lives, and I'm going to tell this story next. So this is just to show that we are truly identical. Let me go back. This is our 23andMe results. So 23andMe is a genetic testing, and they scan over 920,000 mutations. It's almost impossible that two people have the exact same, over 921,000 mutations. But because we're identical, you see that here, 100% similar, just to show that. Because once I gave this talk, and people say, how to prove that you're identical? Say, she looks like this. No, you have to prove. Okay, so this is us 20 years ago. And why is it that I want to show you this slide? Is because exactly 20 years ago, 21 years now, we are both here. Exactly the same weight, 118, 120 pounds. And starting 1995, you see that's her trajectory, and that is mine. And mine looks pretty good, almost as if nothing happened, except here I have to show you this. This is the year I moved to the US. So it took me a few years to adjust, and then I don't know what happened here. And then I started getting better. And this, 2008, is the year I went plant-based. And you see, it's the same as here. So I don't blame the US as much as that when I was in Brazil, I would eat the Brazilian diet, which is what? I was already vegetarian, but Brazilians eat tons of beans. So I'm with the previous speaker when he says beans is the best food you can possibly eat. So black beans and vegetable, I used to eat every single day. I moved to the US. My mom wasn't around to cook beans, and I stopped eating beans, and then I started eating, whole grain bread and the boca, soy burgers and all of these things with a little piece of cheese, and I stopped eating the fruits and the vegetables. There are plenty in Brazil, Brazil eats fruits and vegetables and beans, and it's very simple because it's part. And when I came here, I started eating other things, So that was basically it. But here, every single one of these arrows is a different diet that my sister tried. Okay? So, can hear? What if I speak a little louder? Can you do it better? Can you now? Yes? Can you? Yes. Better? Hello? Better? Okay. I have two hands now full. All right, so I just want you to pay attention to two specific diets. This one, calorie count, it was actually Weight Watchers. It was not calorie, it was points, but it's the same. And this is when she tried what it was called low carb, but you see that it's not low carb. It worked because it was very low fat. And then what happened is, that was 2012. I said, wait a minute, all of this happened without us actually paying attention to it. What would happen if you came to live with me and you ate my diet? So what we did is, this diet happened in the past. This happened in the past. But this diet, we actually controlled. We actually had the intention to see what's going to happen if you eat my diet. So what we end back is, we saw our cholesterol, and just to make a point here, she lost a lot of weight in Weight Watchers, right? Like 40 pounds or 25 pounds. But her cholesterol went worse. Why? Because she was just decreasing the amount of food she's eating, but she's not changing the type of food she's eating. That's the number one problem when you were only paying attention to how much you eat, but not what you eat. And you see that when she was eating what was called low carb, it was actually low fat, it went way better. But when she was eating my diet for just 3 months, her weight was not even close to mine. It was like 30 pounds, 25 pounds of the 50 pounds she had to lose, but her cholesterol was almost identical to mine for the first time in all these years, correct? LDL cholesterol is the same, going to go fast, 105, which is above the limit. Even though she was losing a lot of weight, she was looking great outside, but inside she wasn't. Then it went to 91, which is better. But again, when she ate my diet for 3 months, her LDL cholesterol was identical to mine, which is very, very low. Try to get LDL in the 55, 60. You cannot even get that with a statin. Okay, glucose. When we talk about diet, a lot of people pay a lot of attention to glucose because, I cannot eat carbs because it's going to spike glucose. I cannot eat this because it's going to spike glucose. Glucose is our main source of energy. We want glucose to spike, of course. If glucose doesn't spike, it means that we don't have glucose. We are not getting the energy we need to live. So, and you will see that glucose was the only marker that you could not see a trend. Glucose, it was pretty much the same in all these years for my sister and for me, and in many times my glucose is, you see, same as my sister. Why is that? Because glucose is so tightly genetically regulated that the body is going to do whatever it takes to keep glucose at an appropriate level. But the marker that everybody should be looking at and nobody pays attention is the next one, is insulin. Why? Because insulin is what is telling just how hard the body is working to maintain glucose leveled, correct? So, and if you notice, it was the only marker that changes exactly like my sister's weight changed. So here, her weight was high, her insulin was high. She lost weight, insulin went way down to 4, then she gained the weight again, insulin is high again. So it was the only marker that could predict if she was going to gain weight or if she was going to start losing weight. And then I'm going to show you another marker, which is what I talked before. This is her level of leptin. So you see that when her insulin is high, her leptin is high. Remember I told you at the beginning that anytime insulin is getting high, that leptin is going to get high, but the brain won't see because you're leptin resistant, so the brain doesn't see. So her body is screaming, I had enough to eat, but the brain doesn't see, and she continues to eat. And after six weeks in a plant-based diet, then her insulin here didn't go. Now her insulin was 14, went to 7 or 8. Her leptin in just 6 weeks went from 49 to 13. And then after 12 weeks, her insulin was identical to mine. So she only lost half the weight she wanted to lose, but she wasn't counting calories. So inside, she was exactly like me. She still had, she was the opposite. Inside, she was doing right, even though the outside didn't catch up yet, okay? And then here is her leptin, and here is my leptin. So inside, even though she lost 25 of the 50 pounds that she needed to weigh, inside, she was thin already. She was having the same metabolism as me because she was eating the same diet as me, okay? So when it came to the best blood markers, it was, of course, a whole food plant-based diet, but more importantly than that is it was low fat. And why I talk about this? Because the standard American diet is about 44% fat. What we call in this country as low fat is actually 35%. So it's lower than 44, but it's not low fat. And that's the number one mistake when people say, yes, but Americans started getting fatter when we start eating low fat. But Americans never ever ate low fat. They went from when they are following a low fat diet, instead of eating 44%, they are eating 35%. What I call low fat is anytime your diet is less than 20% fat, okay? So, I was gonna say 35, low fat. I lost my track of thinking. I'll go back. So, but I remember what it is. Remember when I said that one gene, ApoA5, anytime you eat more than 30% of your diet from fat, your risk of being overweight and obese increases. So any person that is following a low fat but a traditional diet is already higher risk of obesity and overweight because it's not really a low fat diet. Let me just explain what this means. When we see a low-fat milk, like 2% milk, the 2% is the weight. And it's not the right way of seeing it. So it's the way they sell you something that is low-fat that is actually not low-fat. Because it's 2% by weight. Most people would think if it's 2% fat, it means that 98% of the fat has been removed. And that is wrong. A low-fat milk is actually 36% fat, which is above 30%, and has 22% saturated fatty acids. And even steamed veggies, when you don't add anything but 1 teaspoon of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, excuse me, you can sell this meal as fat-free because any time is below 0.5, it can be fat-free, but the amount of fat in steamed veggies with 1 teaspoon with olive oil is 45%, and now you have 7% coming from saturated fatty acids. And the limit, according to the American Heart Association, nobody should eat more than 5% of the diet from saturated fat. So if you add olive oil, you will be above the threshold. So just to give you an idea, here's the total amount of fat in 1 slice of bacon and 1 slice of American cheese. American cheese wins. Dairy is the #1 source of total fat and saturated fat in the diet. There's more saturated fat, almost twice as much saturated fat in cheese than in bacon. Eggs and red meat have exactly the same amount of fat as does salmon. And here are the vegetables. That's why when people first switch to a vegan diet, they lose a lot of weight because they are naturally very low in fat. And here, just to make a point, we have the potato, which is the #1 food blamed for people to be obese. You know, the problem is the potatoes. People need to stop eating potatoes to get slim. The problem is not the potato. Potato is 1% fat, 0% saturated fat. The problem is how you eat the potato. The potato that was 1% fat, now it's 38, 31, 37. And nobody eats potato and just a potato. People at least put olive oil in it. And the other thing is that it's 30% total fat, but these genes also say that anytime you eat more than 11% of monounsaturated fat, your risk of being obese or overweight also increases. 11% of the good fats, okay? So nuts, the total amount of the total fat, and which is all of them above 30%, and monounsaturated fat, I believe all of them are above 11%. Okay, healthy fats also contribute to weight gain. And chocolate, of course, 52 to 77%. That's dark chocolate, of course. Saturated fat, tons. Monounsaturated fat, all above the threshold. Chocolate is not a healthy food, healthful food. Okay? What should you eat to make your genes happy and never ever have to worry about your weight again? Low fat, whole food, plant-based diet. We know it's hard to start. You cannot possibly think that you can do it all at once. If I can give you two advice to take home, 2 things that you can do right away. 1, eliminate dairy. And while at it, add beans. 1 cup of beans a day. It has been shown to add 3 to 4 years to your life. Beans and meat comparison, I'm finishing. 100 grams of beans versus 100 black beans versus 100 grams of ribeye steak. Beans have less calories, way less fat, no saturated fat, no cholesterol. 16 grams of fiber. Meat has none. The previous speaker said only 3% of Americans eat the minimum amount of fiber a day, which is 25 grams. You eat 100 grams of beans a day. You eat more than most Americans will ever eat. It has more iron, almost the same amount of protein, and it costs way less. So we know that in life, the harder thing to do and the right thing to do are usually the same. So it's the same with your diet. All of these nice people eat this way. None of them did for health. All of them did for either the environment or because of the animals, but you get the picture. If they can do it, you can do it too. And I had it, but I didn't. We have this, this is a fridge magnet. We're gonna have them outside if you want to. It shows which are the foods that are naturally low in fat, the ones that come next. If you eat from these 2 groups, you never ever gain weight and you're going to lose weight very easily. We also have this, it's a card that you can take to the grocery store. It teaches how to shop. When you buy the few items that you're going to buy that come in a package, for you to be able to truly say if they're below 20% of fat or if they're not. And once you learn, you can just detach, and it's like a credit card, and you put in your wallet, and you never have to buy anything that is has more than 20% fat in your life. And this is a resource we have outside too. This is how, if you're starting in a plant-based living, how to know the science, where to get started, the books, the recipes, and how to find inspiration. And this is our website, UCD, from UC Davis. I am integrativemedicine.com. Thank you.